Do you remember what you heard that night? You heard a voice call out from the flames.
In Season 6, Episode 5, a woman arrived at the Great Pyramid of Meereen and stripped all of that away in less than 90 seconds. She did not use a spy network. She used a fire from 30 years ago and a voice that Varys had spent his entire adult life trying to forget. Her name was Kinvara, and she had information that no living human being could possibly possess. The night in Myr, what happened to Varys, and what he said about it. The scene where Varys disclosed his castration story was Season 3, Episode 4. The episode titled, "And Now His Watch Is Ended." He and Tyrion Lannister were in Tyrion's chambers, and Varys was in the process of revealing a crate he had transported from Essos, a wooden box that contained, he explained, the sorcerer who had castrated him. The reveal was the end of the story. The beginning of the story was what matters for the Season 6 scene with Kinvara. Varys told Tyrion that when he was a boy in Mai, he was purchased by a sorcerer. The sorcerer used him in a ritual, cut him, and burned his parts in a brazier, and then something happened that Varys had been unable to explain or categorize for the rest of his life. He described it to Tyrion in words that the Time magazine article on his backstory quoted directly. "I still dream of that night. Not of the sorcerer, not of his blade. I dream of the voice from the flames. Was it a god, a demon, a conjurer's trick? I don't know. But the sorcerer called, and a voice answered. And ever since that day I have hated magic and all those who practice it." Three elements in that confession matter immensely for the Kinvara scene. The first, he dreams of it, not remembers it occasionally. Dreams of it, meaning it lives in his unconscious, below the level of his controlled waking self. The second, he does not know what the voice was. The man who built a career on knowing things cannot classify this one piece of information. The third, his hatred of magic is rooted here. It is not philosophical or political. It is personal, visceral, and specifically connected to this one night and this one unanswered question. This is the wound that Kinvara walks into in Season 6, Episode 5. Not a metaphorical wound, a literal, unhealed, decades-old thing that Varys has never been able to close because he cannot understand it. And she arrives knowing exactly where it is, how the meeting was arranged, and why Varys' setup made his exposure inevitable. The meeting with Kinvara was Tyrion Lannister's idea. With Daenerys away in base Dothrak, and Meereen under constant pressure from the Sons of the Harpy, Tyrion was looking for a way to build public support for the Queen's return. The Red Priests of Relhor had been preaching Daenerys' cause in the streets already, connecting her fire resistance and her dragons to the Lord of Light's theology with considerable effectiveness among the former Slade population. Tyrion's plan was to formalize that relationship, bring the High Priestess of the Red Temple of Volantis to Meereen, offer her an official alliance, and give the priests the political cover of royal sanction for their preaching. Varys objected from the beginning. His objections, delivered in the meeting before Kinvara arrived, were articulate and reasonable. Religion was inherently self-certain and therefore unreliable as an ally. The Red Priestess Melisandre had championed Stannis Baratheon as the chosen one, and had been spectacularly wrong. Any organization that explained its mistakes as divine will rather than error was a political liability rather than a political asset. These were all valid points. Tyrion knew they were valid. He proceeded anyway, because the practical situation in Meereen overrode the theoretical objections. Varys was present for the meeting, not as a participant in the negotiation, but as a skeptical observer, there to register his objection in real time and to assess the woman across the table. That positioning, the skeptical observer, above the conversation, maintaining evaluative distance, was Varys at his most characteristic and most comfortable. He had spent his entire career in that exact mode, present in rooms, assessing the people in them, never fully of the room himself. It was the mode from which he had never been dislodged. Kinvara walked in, watched him operate for 2 minutes, and pulled him out of it. The conversation, how Kinvara built the ambush in real time. The first thing Kinvara did when she entered the Great Pyramid was establish that she did not need to be persuaded into anything. Tyrion opened with pleasantries and a setup to make his case. She cut it off immediately. "You don't need to persuade me. I came to help." Her announcement that Daenerys Stormborn is the one who was promised, delivered without preamble or qualification, immediately transferred the dynamic of the meeting. Tyrion had come to recruit. She arrived already recruited, which meant she was not in a petitioner's position. She was in a peer's position, at minimum, possibly an authority's. Then Varys made his move. He deployed the Stannis Baratheon argument, the most logical available challenge to her credibility, with the smooth assurance of the man who has always been the most prepared person in any room. I suppose it's hard for a fanatic to admit a mistake. Isn't that the whole point of being a fanatic? You're always right. Everything is the Lord's will. It is a clean rhetorical maneuver. It preemptively frames any response she gives as confirmation of the premise. If she admits the priestess who championed Stannis made a mistake, she concedes fallibility. If she defends the decision, she confirms the fanatic charge. Varys had constructed a closed logical loop and handed it to her as a question. She steps out of it entirely. Everything is the Lord's will, but men and women make mistakes, even honest servants of the Lord. And then, without pausing, without signaling the transition, without giving Varys time to prepare a response, she turns the entire conversation 90 degrees. Terrible things happen for a reason. Take what happened to you, Lord Varys, when you were a child. The full quote, as recorded in the episode transcript, then follows without interruption. If not for your mutilation at the hand of a second-rate sorcerer, you wouldn't be here helping the Lord's chosen bring his light into the world. Knowledge has made you powerful, but there's still so much you don't know. Do you remember what you heard that night when the sorcerer tossed your parts in the fire? You heard a voice call out from the flames. Do you remember? Should I tell you what the voice said? Should I tell you the name of the one who spoke? She then crosses the space between them and places her hand on his arm. Varys, the man who has maneuvered around kings for 30 years, cannot answer. The fandom wiki records his response with the one word that captures everything. Varys scrunches up his face and stares at Kinvara. That scrunch, that involuntary facial response that breaks his composure, not into anger or fear or resistance, but into something more primitive, the face of a person confronted with something they have spent decades trying not to think about, now delivered back to them in precise detail by a stranger who should have no access to it. The intelligence problem. Information she had no earthly way of knowing. This is the layer that separates the Kinvara scene from every other confrontation in the show's 6-season run. The specific impossibility of what she knows. Varys is not rattled by the existence of a secret. Secrets are his medium. He collects them, manages them, exploits them. A political opponent revealing a hidden fact from his past would be jarring but processable. It would mean someone had found a source, bribed a contact, intercepted a message. It would mean human intelligence had reached further than he thought, that he could deal with, because it operates on rules he understands. What Kinvara reveals is categorically different. The voice from the fire is not a secret that exists anywhere in the human world. It was never written down. It was never told to anyone. Varys explicitly told Tyrion he had dreamed of it for decades, but had never classified it, never explained it. The name of the entity who spoke through the flames of a private ritual performed in a locked room in Myr 30 years ago is not intelligence that any network of human informants could have gathered. There is no source. There is no chain of custody for this information. It exists only in two places, in Varys's memory and wherever the voice came from. The fact that Kinvara has it means that whatever or whoever spoke that night is connected to her theology, and that means the theology is not fiction. Time magazine backstory analysis puts the significance precisely. This leads to one of the most interesting scenes in the episode, as Kinvara quickly dresses Varys down by recounting the story of the night he became a eunuch, including details she would have no way of knowing. The phrase, no way of knowing, is doing all the work in that sentence. The impossibility is the point. Varys's composure has always been built on the implicit premise that he operates in a world of explainable causation, people, motives, leverage, money, information. The voice from the fire has never fit that framework. And here is a person who clearly inhabits the same metaphysical register as that voice, describing it to him across a conference table in Meereen, as if the night in Myr were a story she had read in the book. What Kinvara's approach reveals about her, the intelligence in the attack, the method Kinvara uses is worth analyzing in detail, because it is not a blunt instrument. She does not simply announce that she knows about the night in Myr. She builds toward it in stages, each one narrowing the exit available to Varys, so that by the time she arrives at the questions about the voice, there is no room left for him to maneuver. Stage 1 is the general frame. Terrible things happen for a reason. This is theological positioning, establishing that suffering has purpose in the Lord of Light's design, but it is also an implicit warning that she is about to discuss a terrible thing with a purpose. Stage 2 is the specific. Take what happened to you, Lord Varys, when you were a child. She has identified her subject. Varys knows at this point that she knows something, but how much? His face is already beginning to close down. Stage 3 is the precision detail. At the hand of a second-rate sorcerer. That phrase, second-rate, is the tell. It is the kind of specific evaluative detail that only someone with genuine knowledge of the event would include. It is not the phrase a person uses when guessing. It is the phrase used by someone who either witnessed it or has access to the account of someone who witnessed it from the other side of the flames. Stage 4 is the impossible, the voice. By the time she reaches the questions about the voice, she has already established through accumulation that she knows more than any human being should. The final questions are not new information. They are the door she has opened to show Varys what is on the other side. There is also the placement of her hand on his arm. The transcript records it precisely. Kinvara approaches Varys and places her hand on his arm. In a series defined by power expressed through physical positioning, who stands, who sits, who towers, who kneels, that gesture is the scene's most complete visual statement. She has crossed the physical distance he maintains. She has placed herself in contact with a man who has spent his career ensuring that no one gets close enough to touch him. And he does not move away. He cannot. He is held in place not by force, but by the question, what the voice may have been and why the show left it unanswered. The question Kinvara does not answer because Varys cannot bring himself to ask her to, is the one that the entire scene pivots on. Who or what spoke from the fire that night in Mar? The show never answered it. Varys died in Season 8, executed by Daenerys' dragonfire. The secret still unspoken. But the theories that the scene generated are worth examining because they illuminate what the writers were implying about Varys' identity. The most persistent fan theory, noted in the Time magazine backstory analysis, is the royal bloodline reading. Some speculate his revelation about the voice indicates the sorcerer was attempting to perform an act of blood magic akin to what Melisandre did with Gendry, implying that he is a descendant of a royal bloodline and possibly even a hidden Targaryen. The logic is coherent within the show's established magical rules. Blood magic in Westeros and Essos responds to lineage, the Targaryens' historical connection to dragons, the Stark wargs' connection to animals, the specific requirement for Kingsblood in Melisandre's rituals. If the sorcerer in Myr purchased Varys specifically for a ritual requiring royal blood, then Varys' origins would be considerably more significant than a slave boy from Lys. The voice that answered could, in that reading, have been the Lord of Light himself, or a manifestation of whatever power is activated by Targaryen blood in proximity to fire. The show chose not to confirm or deny this. What it did confirm, through Kinvara's presence and knowledge, is that the voice was real, that it was connected to the Lord of Light's religion, and that Varys was known to that religion in a way that extended beyond his public political role. The man who claimed to serve only the realm, only the small folk, only abstract good, was apparently part of a plan that predated every alliance he had ever made consciously. Melisandre's prophecy, the thread that connects the two scenes and closes the arc. Season 6, Episode 5 confrontation with Kinvara is not the only time appraises the act. With Kinvara is a less preconception of the Red. In Season 7, Episode 1, Melisandre and Varys shared a brief, chilling exchange at Dragonstone as she was about to depart. Season 2 was also abandoned by a Pella box that informed her brother Jim with picture of a drug. She told him she would return to Westeros one more time because she had to die in this strange country. And then she looked at him. I will return, dear spider, one last time. I have to die in this strange country. Just like you. The Time magazine piece that surfaced this quote noted that Varys seemed determined to avoid that particular end at all costs, even if it meant betraying those he had sworn allegiance to. And it did mean that. He spent Season 8 writing letters disclosing Jon Snow's true parentage, trying to poison Daenerys, betraying her to every ally who might listen. And he was executed for it, by dragonfire, by Daenerys Targaryen. Awed, burned alive, the same element that had defined the worst night of his childhood, the same element that had spoken to him in Myr with a voice he could never identify. Whether or not the fire that killed him contained the same voice, whether the thing that spoke from the flames in Myr was the same thing that consumed him at Dragonstone in Season 8, Episode 4, the show leaves deliberately open. But the structure is precise. Varys had spent his entire life running from the implications of what happened in that room in Myr. He had built his career on the premise that information is the ultimate power, and that the only threats worth managing are human threats. Kinvara arrived in Season 6, Episode 5, and demonstrated that there was a category of knowledge that his network could not access, a category of power that information could not count to, and a category of threat that had already located him before he had located it. Melisandre confirmed the terminal prediction, and the fire, ultimately, kept the appointment. What the scene reveals about power and the one thing Varys could not protect himself from. The Kinvara scene is the show's most elegant demonstration of the limits of Varys's specific kind of power. He had built an unbreachable position by ensuring that no one had information about him that he had not chosen to disclose. His composure, that famous, slightly amused, entirely unrattled affect, was the product of certainty that he held all the cards. What Kinvara demonstrated in 90 seconds is that there is a category of information that does not move through human networks. It does not travel through spies and little birds and paid informants. It travels through fire. And Varys had been in contact with that fire once, in a room in Myr, when he was a child and had no choice, and the contact had never fully ended. The show billed Varys as the character who was always in control of what others knew about him. Every other character in the series had legible vulnerabilities: love, pride, fear, ambition, that enemies could find and exploit. Varys had, as his single unique trait, the absence of those legible vulnerabilities. He cared about nothing that could be taken from him. He wanted nothing that could be withheld. He loved no one who could be threatened, except for the one thing that was not a relationship or an ambition, or a fear of losing something, the one unanswerable question that had been running underneath every day of his adult life. What was the voice? Who spoke from the fire? Why him? Kinvara did not answer those questions. She simply confirmed that the answers existed. She knew them. And the most powerful spy master in Westeros, the man who had never, not once in 5 seasons, been put in a position where another person held information he lacked and he could do nothing about it, sat in a chair in Meereen, and for the first time in the show's entire run, had nothing to say.